Okay, so when we're asked to solve this equation on the interval from 0 to 2 pi, we have the cosine of x times the cosine at pi over 3 plus the sine of x times the sine of pi over 3 equals -1. We want to figure out what angle we can plug into here that makes that true. Okay, and hopefully you know or have been taught that you can't solve, well you can, but there's some tricky things to do. You shouldn't solve a trig equation with more than one trig word in it. So what we want to do is condense this down as much as possible to see if we can have a single trig word. Now, hopefully you have some of your sum and difference formulas handy, because if you do, maybe you recognize this as being a sum or difference formula for cosine. So this turns out to be, in fact, a sum formula, or rather difference formula, for your cosine of two angles. Okay, so normally you're given a problem like this, where you have two angles, and then you need to simplify it or find the exact value by plugging it into an equation. Well, here we're given the equation that you have to simplify to that identity. The cosine of the first angle minus the second angle, and that needs to equal -1. Okay, so there's the trick there, is replacing that long addition problem with a single cosine problem. Okay, so now that we have the cosine, we need to solve for x. So the first thing we do is get rid of the cosine, and we do that by inverse cosining. So the inverse of the cosine cancels that out, and we're just left with x minus pi over 3. And on the right side, we now have the inverse cosine at -1. Okay, so hopefully you understand what that means, and that means at what angle on the unit circle is the cosine have a value of -1. And hopefully you know that that occurs at pi, or 180 degrees if you are so inclined. But at pi, the coordinate is -1, 0, so the cosine at -1 is pi. So now we simply add pi over 3 to both sides. Okay, now I have a number plus a fraction, so I'm going to change my pi into 3 pi over 3 so that I have the same denominators, and I find that the angle we needed to start with in order to make that a true statement is the angle 4 pi over 3 in radian measure.